Hi everyone, welcome to this video on Kubernetes service and its type. So basically the Kubernetes is a powerful container orchestration tool that allows us to deploy and manage containerized applications at a scale. So in this video we will be discussing Kubernetes service and the different types of services available in Kubernetes. So first we will discuss what is Kubernetes service and then we will discuss later on what are the different types of Kubernetes service. Let us first start by defining what is Kubernetes services. In Kubernetes, a services is an abstraction that defines a logical sets of pod and a policy by which to access them. Now, this is a kind of definitions. What if anybody asks, we can say that. But for to understand, let us in a simple language, what we can say that a services which enable the communications between the different parts of an applications running in Kubernetes, either both internally or externally. So in the screen, as we can see that, so here we are in the current default namespace. So as you can see, I'm using Minikube for showing the presentations. So we are in the mini default namespace. So we have other namespace as well, just like as kube system, kube public, kube node lease, kube dash Kubernetes dashboard. So we are in the default namespace and we are in the services tab or services section. You can see here, these are the uh, services which I have just created should to show in this videos. So this like as you can see here, the name of the service, what are the labels which have been assigned to that particular service, and what is the type of service, and what is the cluster IP, what is the internal endpoint, and what is the external endpoints, and when it was created. So these are the informations you can get it from the UI or dashboard for any Kubernetes, just like as or GKE or AWS or any cluster managed or self-managed or by the KubeADM. You can get all this information from the dashboard, and you can get these informations from the we can say that CLI as well. So just like as what we have to do that K8s service, if you wanted to go into the particular namespace, what you have to do hyphen and mention the namespace. So as we have seen the same information of the service type in the dashboard, as we can see here as well. So these are all the services and the types and the cluster IP and the external endpoint. As of now, we haven't installed any, we can say that controller or nginx or just like as to give us an external endpoint ingress, we can say that. So that's why no any load balancer has been configured on Minikube. That's why the external IP here it's showing as a pending for load balancer as a type of service in Kubernetes. So this is the way how we can do that. Now we will discuss what are the types of Kubernetes services. So basically there are three types of Kubernetes services. The first one is cluster IP, the second one is node port, and the third one is load balancer. As we have already seen that what are the different types of services which we have created. So first we will discuss the cluster IP. So this is the type of service. This is the default, we can say that the type of service. And what it does, it exposes the services on the cluster internal IP addresses. Okay, this means that the services is only accepted within the cluster, not from the outside the cluster. So just like as if in a cluster we have n number of pods. So if we created a cluster, if we didn't specify while creating the service, it would automatically pick default as a Kubernetes cluster IP as a service, and it will create a communications between all the pods within the cluster. So cluster IP as a services is useful when we wanted to expose our application internally to the other pods of the cluster. Okay, so what we have to do that k create, we are going to first see the imperative way. Imperative means with the one line command, and after that in the form of declarative way, or we can say that in the terms of YAML. So K create SVC stand for service, and the type of service that is cluster IP, and the name of service just like as we are in testing. So like testing 2, this is the name testing 2, and we need to mention the port. Okay, so accordingly we can mention any port, just like as where we wanted to expose it. So we can mention, so basically here we are mentioning the TCP port, so hyphen hyphen TCP and just port name, just like as 80. I'm just mentioning as default with an 80. I wanted to expose my services to be on 80 ports. So as you can see here, my service testing 2 is been created. So when I just say k get service and I wanted to grab for that particular service only, testing 2. So as you can see here, testing 2 is created. The type is cluster IP and this is the cluster IP address, and there is no external IP because this enables the communications within the cluster, not outside of the cluster. So this is the port and the type of port is TCP port. Okay, so this is the same way what we have done for by the help of imperative command to creating a service for a cluster IP. So if you wanted to see the YAML for the same, what we have to do, k get service and the name of service hyphen o YAML, just like as output we just wanted the form of YAML. Okay, just mention these things. Wait, it says that testing is not found. Okay, this types of things can be happen in day-to-day activities, so be careful. We created a name as a testing 2, not with testing. So let's see. So this is the YAML which has been created for the service. Okay, so API version is v1, kind is service, metadata, the labels automatically, as we can see here, we didn't mention any labels because where we wanted to apply that services. Okay, so basically for applying the services on the pod level, we are using labels and selector. We are labeling the pods with the labels and we are using that in as a form of selectors in Kubernetes Kubernetes service manifest YAML file. So as you can see here in specifications, the cluster, this is the cluster IP, it's been automatically assigned. So ports we just mentioned as 80 and the protocol is TCP. The selector, what we have seen that. So whatever the name, whatever the pods which is labeled as testing 2 in the app, so it will be automatically the service would be applied to those all pods. Okay, so this is the type of service for cluster IP. Now we will move on to the Nodeport service. This is the second type of service, we can say that it's a Nodeport service. So this type of services exposes the service on a port on each node in a cluster. Okay, so this means that the service is accessible from outside the cluster, but it's not recommended for productions use because it exposes the application on static port that can conflict with other applications. So basically in node port services, we can expose the port from a node port from 30,000 to 32,767. So we have if we wanted to expose our pod to outside of the node, we can use that node port as a service. So how we can do that? K create. Okay, this is also a type of service. So we have to do k create service and the type of service, that is node port hyphen hyphen TCP. This is the port for the pod. So just mention, and we need to mention the name of the service, just like as node port hyphen svc. Okay, we cannot use this as a name, so node port svc. So as we can see here, it's our service node port has a service has been created. So k get svc, let's see. So as we can see here, node port service has been created and the type is node port, and this is the cluster IP automatically assigned. The port on the pod is 80, and by default what we have discussed, from 30,000 to 32,767 automatically one port on the node has been assigned. So that is assigned from 32,135. Okay, so as we can see here, other node ports also is already available, but these two are different. Okay, so that's why we didn't specify the use to node port as a service in production, because there would be possibility that two pods have the same port number, the possibility to conclude or conflict. So that's why we don't suggest to use node port as service in the productions. So the same way, if you wanted to see the YAML for this particular service, what we have to do, just like as k get svc, the service and the service name, what we have created node port svc -o yaml. So as you can see here, the name of the service, that is Nodeport SVC, the kind is service, API version is v1, and this is the cluster IP automatically it would assign. The ports, or we can say that target port, that is 80, and the node port is 32,135. We didn't specify, automatically it would fetch from those range values. So protocol is TCP, we just mentioned, and the selector itself, the name Nodeport SVC. So whatever the pod which has been labeled as an app is equal to Nodeport SVC, this particular service would applies on those pods. Okay. So now we will discuss our third part, that is load balancer as a service in Kubernetes type. So this is the third type of Kubernetes service in the load balancer service. So these type of services which exposes the service externally using a cloud provider's load balancers. So this is the recommended way to expose our application externally in a production environment. So what we have seen that, so basically if you wanted to expose our pod to outside of the cluster, outside of the node, and in a production way, so rather than using a node pod as a service, use a load balancer as a service in Kubernetes. So whenever we are using Kubernetes service, so we have a cloud native load balancer. We can use any one of them, just like as the GCP, AWS, or Azure. We can use some third parties as well accordingly as per our requirement. So when we just wanted to create a load balancer in terms of imperative way, what we have to do, k create svc, and the type, that is the load balancer, and the name, that is lb4, let it be, and hyphen hyphen tcp. We just wanted to mention the pod port, that is tcp, let it be at 80 itself, or 85, it's not an issues. So just as we can see here, because we didn't specify any load, we don't have any load balancer in our mini cube, so that's why external IP would be shows as a pending, because it is not going to be exposed. It would not going to get any external IP for that, for this service. Ideally, there would be, because if we are using GKE, AWS, AKS, or from Azure Kubernetes service, so we will get that external IP address by default whenever we create a load balancer as a service. So let's see K8s Service lb4 -o yaml. So as we can see here, the status that this is load balancer, the type is load balancer, selector app lb4, the name itself. So whatever the pods which has been labeled as app is equal to lb4, this service is going to applies on those pods. So all the informations are remain same, nothing changed. The pods which we have mentioned, automatically node port, the service, the node port would be assigned from 30,000 to 32,767, any one of the port. So, so this is related information. So when you wanted to see K8 service, so as we can see here, LB4, there is no external endpoint because there is no um, cloud native load balancer has been configured. So we are doing on the testing just like it. That's why we haven't specified. So this is related the informations of all the types what we have discussed. So the same way we can see all these informations in our dashboard as well. So let me refresh it. If it wouldn't work, what we will do that we will run the minikube dashboard again. So it will give us an endpoint to see the same thing. So let it be. We will go on the service section. So this is the load balancer type which we have created, the Nodeport service. Succeeded means that the type, the cluster IP, the internal endpoints, all the things has been configured. So as you can see here, this pending one, it means that there is no external endpoint has been assigned. That's why it's showing as pending. And for cluster IP addresses has been assigned for the cluster IP. So that's why it's showing as succeeded. So these are the three types in a Kubernetes service which we have. So basically, this is it. So this is the this is for this video on the Kubernetes services and its type. We have learned that Kubernetes services provided as a way to expose our applications and enable communications between different parts of our applications. We have also covered the three types of services, available in Kubernetes, that is ClusterIP, Nodeport, and Load Balancer. Thank you for watching the video. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more videos on Kubernetes and other container related topics. Thank you.